The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. New York Mets baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. The co-hosts of the show are Marty Rose and Robert Cole. Both are present and accounted for. Hello, gentlemen.
Hi, Ralph.
Hello, Ralph. Nice to have you back. This is going very well. For those of you out there who are wondering why it isn't New York baseball, we've divided it into two shows. It's New York Mets baseball and New York Yankees baseball. And Robert Denninger and Jack DeGraw are the Yankee guys, and Marty and Robert are the Met guys. And here we go. This is about the third week we've been together, and it really flows between the three of us, I must say. So let's have a good one today. Two things we're going to talk about with the Mets before we get to the main subject, which is a look back into how the Mets were actually formed back after the Giants and Dodgers left in 1957. Things started to get into place to have a team, future team, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to pay homage to those who were responsible and really clear up some misconceptions in terms of how things got to be the way they were. But first, guys, let's talk about the two things that are up in the air as far as the formation of the 2018 team. 2018 team.
Easy for you to say, Ralph.
According to Sandy Alderson, there are two things need to be done. One of them, he mentioned getting a second-tier pitcher, like a third, fourth guy in the rotation, because of all the question marks. They've got DeGrom and Thor, whom you could really count on, and how many other question marks are going. Marty, you were talking off the air about the two pitchers they're considering. Who are they? And what are they about?
Second line guys.
Right.
Lance Lynn and Alex Cobb were the two names that were mentioned, and they both would be like third, fourth starters, like those kind of guys. So those were the guys mentioned. Everybody else, everybody seems to be healthy. I mean, I'm not hearing any problems with the current guys that you expect to be there. They're saying that Harvey is excited about the new manager, and they think he's going to be better. You got to look at.
It's a matter of health with guys like Wheeler and Matz and Harvey.
The thing is, you got to look at what this manager did last year as the pitching coach in Cleveland. They led the league in ERA with like a 3.3. I think they led the majors in ERA, and the Mets were 27th. Wow. So this guy has got ideas that he wants to put into place. Like a pre-workout, 1.5 hours before they hit the field. They got massages and weight room and stretching and riding a bike and stuff like that. So that's even before they get on the field. So he's been successful. So we'll see. Sounds possibly exciting to me.
Right. You know, it struck me when you were talking about getting a second-tier pitcher was I hearkened back to before last season how they were talking about what are we going to do to cut our pitching staff. We've got 7, 8 guys who are top-flight guys, and we have such an abundance of riches that how could we not do great, this, that, and the other thing? Injuries got them. And if Callaway can come up with a program that will eliminate the injuries and get these guys in top shape, and if you could hydrate Cespedes, we may have something here.
Yeah, he's got a plan. He's got a plan he's going to stick with, and he even mentioned to give guys a little more rest. You know, when the schedule gets really tight, going to a 6-man rotation just for maybe a couple of turns a couple of turns. So, he's definitely.
That's something. If you go back on all the tapes of these shows that we've done, Marty, you came up with that about 2 years ago.
Well, I was talking about it on a regular basis, but I guess that's proved not to be that effective because guys are more in the routine to pitch every 5th day. But,
right, staying sharp.
When it gets
that and the other.
The dog days, you need an extra day maybe here or there. I could see.
Right. So, Robert, what do you say to this?
Well, let me speak about Alex Cobb for a second because I followed him his whole career. He's been down here in Tampa Bay. And at one point, it looked like he would be a number 1 pitcher. A couple of years ago, he had Tommy John surgery. And last year was his first full year back from Tommy John. And history has shown us that usually the second and third year back from Tommy John is when they're at their best. He's also pitched in the East Division in the American League, meaning he faced the Red Sox a lot, faced the Yankees a lot. And he can handle that kind of pressure. So I think, out of the two, Lance Lynn and Alex Cobb, I would probably lean towards Alex Cobb simply because of his experience and the fact that he's played in the markets where he'd have to pitch in.
Is he a free agent?
Yes.
Okay, so we're not talking about giving up anybody.
No. He's a free agent. He's one of those 7 or 8 guys that are still out there that everybody expected to be signed way before now.
Okay. With that in mind, do you think there's some sort of collusion? I'm going to ask both of you that. Starting with you, Marty Rose.
I don't think so, Ralph. I think guys are being more careful. I think that the general managers have gotten so young compared to what they used to be, and they've gotten different ideas. All these newfangled ways of judging talent and not wanting to get into these super long contracts. I think that's what's going on. I don't think there's collusion. There's been a number of signings. It's not like nobody's signed, but nobody wants to give that many years or that much money, and I think there may be a little anti-Scott Boras that's been going on for a few years already, which I can understand why.
He's got, no exaggeration, 17 or 18 free agents that are up this year, let alone what's going on next year. And that may have something to do with it. Teams may be reluctant to shoot their wad when next year there's going to be what they say is the top class ever of free agents. So
true. Yeah.
That may be. How old is Cobb, Robert?
Cobb, I believe, is 28 or 29.
Oh, wow. Well, so we're talking plenty of upside. And
oh, yeah. He was really rising to the top when he had the Tommy John a couple of years ago. He was considered the Rays' number 1 pitcher at that point.
Right.
I think Cobb and Lynn are about the same age. Yeah. Some 29, 30, whatever.
Where did Lynn play?
St. Louis.
St. Louis.
Oh, okay. We shall see. We shall see. How about second base, guys? What comes to mind for you, Robert, when I say that?
Still waiting to see if they sign a Frazier or sign a Nunez. I mean, I really like to see them sign Nunez because he's very versatile. Mm-hmm. And then you can play Nunez at third. You can play Cabrera at second. Give him a lot more versatility. But until something happens with these free agents, you just don't really know.
Yeah. I heard a quote by Cabrera saying that he'd be perfectly open to going to second. So that led me to believe that perhaps they were going to look at Frazier. And at this point, are they Yankees and Mets both losing interest in him? Because he wants to stay in New York. Why is it taking so long for him to sign in particular? He wasn't the top third baseman. They're talking about Moustakas, this, the other thing, this, that, and the other thing. I would think that he would have been a cinch to sign.
Multi-years. He's looking for a multi-year contract. The Yankees would have signed him in a heartbeat for 1 year. The Mets would sign him in a heartbeat for 1 year.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
You know, we were talking collusion before. It's not the money. You know, the money is still there like it always has been. It's the amount of years. And so many of these guys have gotten burnt in the back years of a contract, and they're trying to avoid that. I think what you're going to wind up seeing is more and more guys signing extensions rather than playing out their contracts and going free agent.
Good point. Good point. Again, we'll see. Anybody else at second that you think might be a possibility besides Nunez and, again, getting Frazier at third, thereby moving Cabrera to second? Yeah, do we still hear talk about Harrison?
That would have to be a trade. And,
yeah.
You know, they don't want to give up Nimmo. They wouldn't give up Nimmo for McCutchen. They're not going to give him up for Harrison.
Okay. And a name that none of us can really look at objectively because he got off to such a great start with the Mets when he was here before, and then he got hurt, and it was back problems. And once you hear a player has back problems, you don't ever expect him to be as good as new.
Are you talking about Neil
Walker? Has Walker gotten back to being as good as new?
I didn't see it last year when he came back. But I also have heard that he's very, very angry with the Mets, and I don't think he's even considering the Mets at this point, unless they're the only game in town.
I don't think they want him back. I don't.
All right. And Harrison you'd have to trade for, and they're really not deep anywhere, deep enough to put anything together. Their farm system is somewhat depleted, let's put it that way, because they had all these guys coming up, and boy, I'm just thinking if they'd have stayed healthy and if they can come back to being healthy, we may be able to catch lightning in a bottle.
Oh, it's all about the pitching staff.
Yeah.
It's all about the pitching staff.
I think they've agreed that catching, they're going to go, as Marty said months ago, might as well go with Pilecki and Diarno and, try to get the best out of both of them.
And they also signed Jose Lobaton to a minor league contract. He's a proven major league catcher. I mean, he's not an elite catcher, but if either one of the top two guys go down, I mean, he's ready to move up also.
That's nice. They don't have to rush Nido, in other words, if anything happens.
Right.
That's true.
And who knows, Nito, he did very well in the Arizona League. He may push the envelope in spring training. Who knows? He's got a great arm. You got to love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're going to give him a good shot. Good look, for sure. But, he needs some AAA time.
Oh, yeah. And it's too bad they didn't make the move with their minor league team to Syracuse this year.
Yeah, they couldn't do it.
Boy, did they ever start some controversy. They go into Syracuse. I think Syracuse made the deal with them where they'd have to change their name. So they change a name that's been the Syracuse Chiefs for like 40, 50 years, and they make them the Syracuse Mets. And people in Syracuse have to be shaking their heads a little bit at that. But I guess it's the way of it, the corporate way of it. They want to keep that label
because
up.
they bought the team outright.
Yeah.
It's not like I think Binghamton. They don't own Binghamton. I don't think they just have a working agreement.
I think they do.
Think they own Binghamton because they changed their name from the Mets. Used to be the Binghamton Mets, and now they're the Rumble Ponies. So, so that was either last year or the year before they changed to the Rumble Ponies.
Wouldn't you like to see a minor league affiliate change their name to the Mutts, and they have a dog on thing? A guy gets called up from the Mutts today to the Mets, sent from the Mets to the Mutts. Who are the Mutts and who are the Mets? We can't tell.
Exactly.
Depends what day of the week it is.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, what month, what year. Wow, this has been a ride to follow. And Robert, as far as I know, you were an original Met fan. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, you were a Dodger fan, a Brooklyn Dodger fan. When
Correct.
the Brooklyn Dodgers left, who did you lean to?
First couple of years, still the Dodgers in Los Angeles, because they still had many of the old Brooklyn Dodgers. And a couple of times we went to Philadelphia to see them when they came in. And then early on, I then became a 7-team American League fan, anybody but the Yankees.
Right.
And then, of course, the Mets were announced in like 1959 that they were going to be 1960 that they were going to be formed. And
okay, let's go back to the history of that. Wasn't it, if I'm not mistaken, it was Branch Rickey who headed up the Continental League, and he proposed X number of teams to come in and basically just compete with Major League Baseball. And
Bill Shea made the announcement. Bill Shea made the announcement.
Yeah, Mayor Wagner wanted a team in New York. They couldn't get any of the National League teams to come to New York, so he asked William Shea, the lawyer William Shea, actually announced the formation of a third major league to begin play in 1961. And one of the charter teams would be the New York Mets.
Okay.
Yeah, there's going to be eight teams in the Continental League.
And I think there have been 6 that got Major League franchises.
7.
7?
The only of the original Continental League teams that has not been in the majors is Buffalo.
Right.
Whoa, that's a great stat. Thank you for that. That's as
there were 5 charter teams: New York, Houston, Twin Cities, Toronto, and Denver were the 5 charter teams, and then they added Atlanta, Buffalo, and Dallas to complete the 8.
Correct.
And now that shows some foresight in terms of looking at markets and developing it. Who does it but Branch Rickey? For those of you, not you guys, but anybody listening that may not know, Branch Rickey is absolutely the most important man in the history of baseball. He developed the farm system itself. He signed George Sisler when he owned the St. Louis Browns, went to the Cardinals, develops the farm system, develops the Gas House Gang, goes from the Cardinals to the Dodgers. You know what he does with the Dodgers, a few little things. Goes from Jackie Robinson, etc. Goes from the Dodgers to the Pirates when he doesn't get along with O'Malley and O'Malley forces him out. He basically builds the Pirates from nothing to a world championship, starting with signing Dick Grote and making him a one-star, a one-team player. He was a basketball player in the NBA, and Branch Rickey convinced him to play one sport because, like with Conley, he played both sports, but he was a substitute. He didn't play very much behind Bill Russell. Grote was a pretty good ball player, and he would have been playing every day in the NBA. You don't just play every day in the NBA, no off-season, play every day in baseball, no off-season.
Didn't he play for Duke also?
He played for Duke,
yes.
And I don't remember what team he played for in the NBA, but it might have been the NBL or right before the merger back there. Yes, he played for Duke.
Yeah,
so I thought that did it in terms of ball, because that laid the foundation of having Grote a good, solid shortstop. He also finagled Clemente out of the Dodger organization by hiding him basically in his last year. He knew he was going to go. He hit him in the minors, and he got to draft him when he went to Pittsburgh. Then he goes from there to the, like we say, the Continental League, forming the Continental League. He does that. It was obviously successful in the sense that it forced everything we know baseball to be. We'd be talking about we'd be talking about Flowers. It's a New York Mets show. So he goes from there, and he becomes a consultant with the St. Louis Cardinals, and helps build them to where they were in like '64. He builds them, and then he leaves the Cardinals. Did something else. Off the top of my head, I can't think what it was. That was enough, Branch Rickey. So, got to give the credit there. Who are the people that resisted the Mets coming? In other words, like Shea was obviously for him. Mrs. Payson, who was the last person to hold out, she was on the board of directors of the New York Giants, and didn't vote to move. So she always wanted baseball back. She was a big Giant fan, big Willie fan, couldn't wait to have a team. And then they built a team around the old Dodgers, like not Newcomb, he was a little old, but Snyder,
Roger Craig.
Yeah, Charlie Neal, Zimmer, all these guys, Clem Labine. Initially, I think Joe Ginsberg came out of the Dodger organization. They had him for a while. That surprised me. Did it surprise you guys in looking back why they went to the Dodgers. Very few Giants. I think they tried to get Antonelli and Lowe's, but that didn't work out. Robert.
Okay, well, they actually signed Antonelli and Lowe's. Lowe's actually was in the Thanksgiving Day parade float for the New York Mets. But he was,
wow.
He was a bit of
from Jackson Heights, where Marty and I are from, Robert.
But he was zany, and then after riding in the float, he got off the float and decided he didn't want to play baseball anymore. Kind of the same thing with Antonelli. Antonelli, they made a trade with, I think he was back with the Braves. They made a trade to bring him, and then he decided he didn't want to play. And I think just for the sake of the fans, basically, the majority of the fans that were the most hurt by the moves were Brooklyn fans, old Brooklyn fans. And George Weiss and Casey Stengel decided to build a team around them. Now, if it had been 8 or 10 years earlier, they may have won a pennant in that first year, but that wasn't to be.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They were, on paper, really solid. But then you take aging and injuries into consideration, and they went downhill fast. Al Blumkin tells the story about Casey. He had Gene Woodling with the Mets that first year for a while. And they're sitting in their sitting on the bench, just chatting before the game. And Casey says to Woodling, "Ain't like it used to be, huh?" Woodling has to agree. I think Woodling was among the 13 that won with the Yankees from 49 to 53, 5 straight World Series championships. Woodling was, and naturally Casey managed them. Woodling was on those teams, and it wasn't like it used to be. That's for damn sure.
Well, an interesting story about Woodling, okay? Marv Throneberry and Woodling were on that 1962 team. And after the season, George Weiss sent Throneberry his new contract, and Throneberry showed it to Woodling, and Woodling said, "No, Marv, you can't settle for that much money. Okay, send that back, ask for more money." Woodling had signed a contract as a player-coach for 63. When George Weiss found out what he said to Throneberry, he immediately cut him. And then Throneberry wound up getting sent to the minors, never to be seen again.
Very interesting. Sent to Buffalo, as a matter of fact. Buffalo was their minor league team. Interesting. The one team that didn't get a franchise got to be the Mets minor league team.
Yep.
So, great story. Interesting. What else do you... I remember Marv Throneberry and Richie Ashburn both were awarded boats. Marv Throneberry because of his popularity. And one of them... I don't remember what Ashburn got a boat for, but it turns out that Ashburn didn't pay taxes, and Throneberry had to pay taxes on the boat that they gave him. It was just Throneberry's luck. He was a hell of a prospect with the Yankees.
Yes, he was.
Before, and traded for Don Zimmer. They traded Don Zimmer to Baltimore to get him sometime in early May. Zimmer was like 1 for 34 as a Met. And you would think that would be addition by subtraction, but oh no. Throneberry cost them a lot of games in a lot of different ways. He and Keneal, they were lovable losers, yes, but I remember Marty and I weren't that happy with them losing all the time. Very soon, that the fun of that wore off for us. We were, New York, you used to go into a World Series every year. It's a birthright, or at least having it played in your town. So it wasn't fun initially, but quickly they built it to a championship team. two guys that come to mind there are Weiss, who was responsible for signing a lot of the guys that came through. Whitey Herzog helped develop those guys, and Gil Hodges naturally takes them to the championship. Brings us back to something Robert Cole is very adamant about. I know Marty, with good common sense, feels the same way I do. Gil Hodges needs to be in the Hall of Fame. You are a Dodger fan.
Absolutely.
Robert, why don't you make a little case for him first? And we were a little more removed from it because we're rooting against him for the most part. But make a case for Gil Hodges in the Hall of Fame for us.
Okay, well, at one point he owned the record for most home runs by a right-handed hitter, okay, which he passed Ralph Kiner by one just before he retired. Everybody else on that list before him and many after him are now in the Hall of Fame. He was probably one of the best fielding, if not the best fielding, first baseman of the 50s. His problem probably is that he fit into a niche from 47 to 57, and then they moved to Los Angeles, and he kind of lost his identity. But most definitely, I mean, he hit over 100 RBIs, I believe, 7 years in a row. At one time, he held the National League record for most Grand Slam home runs, which was later passed. But if you look in the records, guys like Tony Perez, Orlando Cepeda, same numbers. Okay, they're in the Hall of Fame. He's not, and it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The problem now is that everybody wants to look at sabermetrics and all these new metrics and WAR and all kinds of things like that, and it's not fair to judge players like Hodges who played before those numbers by these new modern-day numbers.
Right. Well, and it's not fair to judge people just by their numbers. There are the intangibles that go with it, such as character. I mean, this is a war hero who was a member of the community. The old Dodgers, I think Marty might remember this. It wasn't just, it was the New York community. Carl Furillo owned a deli, a little, not a deli, but a little grocery store on 31st Street, 31st Avenue. You remember that?
I remember something about that, yeah.
Yeah, the Jankelowitz store later became the store that Arthur Jankelowitz's family owned.
Oh, okay. Right.
So it was off, it must have been 92nd and 31st or whatever. But I remember going in there as a little kid, and I remember Carl Furillo with a white apron, a grocer's apron. These guys had to work in, no question. In the off-season. Totally different era. And again, expansion makes those guys even more heroic because there were like 8 teams in the league with 25 players. Mm-hmm. And each team had like, not so much in the 60s by the time the Mets came into it, but way back in the day, Dodgers, Cardinals, they probably had 7, 8, 9 farm teams, 2 or 3 A teams, 2 or 3 A teams, 2 or 3, coming up, Triple A teams. And I remember the Yankees having Richmond and Syracuse at the same time. It's a hell of a lot of more competition from that standpoint. But today's players can say it's a lot more competition today's standpoint because you got players from all different countries coming in and
right.
competing. So
one more thing about Gil Hodges, Ralph. One other thing about Gil Hodges.
Yes.
He took a 100-1 ninth place team to win the World Series. So
that's what the odds were. That's
what the odds were. You know, that's got to count for something too, in addition to what he ever did on the field himself. You know.
No question about that. No question. But a true Hodges supporter trying to get him in. I remember guys like from Facebook, Bill Hall and Tony D'Angelo and Scott Russell and yourself and Sackhead. Yourself. Here I get a little spacey tonight, but Robert Cole, you're consider yourself to be a historian. You say without equivocation that Hodges should be in.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And you're saying that without the added effect of taking a team 100-1 odds. The only two people that believed in them winning in spring training was Jerry Grody, because he knew what that pitching staff was about, and Gil Hodges. And Gil Hodges sold it to those guys, and he was able to handle the enigmatic Cleon Jones.
Oh, yeah.
And that took some doing. And because he was talented as fuck, I mean, there's no question about that. But he tended to loaf, and there were a lot of young players, and Hodges did not want that precedent set. And I remember he got out of the dugout and pulled him off the field one day. Do you guys remember what that was about?
Yes. It was the second game of a doubleheader against the Astros, and the ball got hit to left field, and it got past Cleon, and Cleon sort of just kind of ambled after it instead of running hard after it. Gil came out. It was a wet day. I remember it had been raining previously. Gil walked out, talked to him for a couple of seconds, turned around, and Cleon followed him back into the dugout. Now, in the papers the next day, it was speculated that he was taken out because he didn't hustle. But it came out later, supposedly, that Cleon had been hurt, and Gil came out and talked to him and said, let's get you out of here before you hurt yourself anymore. So which of those two stories is the real story? Never really know.
Mm-hmm. Right, but just that there is an alternative story to him being yanked, because I've never heard that before.
Yes, yeah. That came out later. The popular one at the time was that, Gil yanked him because he was not hustling.
Right. Interesting. Very interesting.
Also, I don't know if you guys realize it or remember it, but Gil actually should have been voted into the Hall of Fame. The Veterans Committee, which was then chaired by Ted Williams, had a meeting one year. Roy Campanella was sick, couldn't attend the meeting. He wanted to phone his vote in. Ted Williams said, no, I can't take phone-in votes. You have to be here in person and vote. And Gil missed it by one vote that year. If Campy had been there, where they accepted that vote, Gil would have been voted in by the Veterans Committee.
And if I'm not mistaken, that was a Ted Williams Ego trip. They both managed in Washington.
Correct.
And one preceded the other. Off the top of my head, I can't think.
Yeah, Gil was first. He managed the Dodgers first and went to the Mets. Williams came in after him. And
not the Dodgers, the Senators.
The Senators. And the record went down. And some people were grumbling about the fact that, the team went worse under Williams than Hodges. And he just had a something about Gil after that. Never liked him.
Right. What gets me about the whole voting system is that in our lifetime, it's changed probably 10 times. What, with the Veterans Committee?
Oh, easily, yes.
Easily. So it was an objective situation before. Now it's become absurd. It was it was subjective before. Now it's becomes absurd. It's craziness. You can't judge who should have been in and who's in and who should be in anymore. Well, what's your opinion about the gambling thing? I was thinking about this before. If you want to put Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson in, you can make a case for putting those two in and taking Ty Cobb and Tris Speaker out for, or keeping all four in, because there's a book coming out by our own Ian Kahanowitz, which another baseball historian who does a podcast called Genesis on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, just published a book, or is in the process of publishing a book, saying that Speaker and Cobb bet on baseball. What say you guys?
Well, I'd have to see the proof. I mean, I've never seen any proof of that. We know there is proof of Pete Rose, and we know there's proof of Shoeless Joe Jackson, even though Joe Jackson didn't do anything to lose games. He did admit that he took money.
Pete Rose did nothing, no betting. I'm sure he bet, but he wasn't guilty of anything until he became a manager. So if you just take his playing record, which, hey, he broke Ty Cobb's hit record, he should be in from that standpoint. And there are a number of less than exemplary personalities who are in, and some who cheated to get in. It's a museum, for crying out loud. Honor them all. Let them, what the hell after all these years?
Oh, yeah. I agree. I mean, it started out to be the Hall of Gods. Only the very, very best of the very, very best were going to get in. And, of course, that's evolved downward since then.
Right.
You look at football, basketball, hockey. I mean, they don't have the same high regard for the players. If a player was good, he gets in.
Yeah, the standards. And for some reason, baseball lore is built around that Hall of Fame. And it's the way it is. Marty, anybody in that shouldn't be in, or out that, out that should be in that should be out? Start with in that should be out. Anybody in there that really rubs you the wrong way?
Well, I think we may have spoken about this before. Some of these guys that got in, like you were saying, on the Veterans Committee, because they have friends that were there, and the guys were good, but it's not the Hall of Good. It's not the Hall of Very Good. There's guys that obviously should not be in. I think we mentioned Mazeroski before.
Right.
Not that he wasn't a very good fielder, he was, but he's known for one thing, and that was it. So he rubs me the wrong way. And
well, we disagree on Mazeroski. He was the best second baseman in the National League for like 10 years, and he was not just a good fielder. He was as quick as anybody turning the double play. And so I think he and Ozzie Smith both should be in, and I think defense gets the bum's rush. along the way.
Well, I think, shortstop is, the position that gets mostly noted for defense more than second base, for some reason. That's why, Ozzie Smith got, as high a percentage as he did.
Yeah. I hope Omar Vizquel gets in for that very reason.
Well, we'll see.
He was an absolute pleasure to watch. I watched him with the Giants out here the last year or two of his career, and he was just incredible. So,
no question.
Hope he gets in. This has been a good show, guys. I enjoyed chatting with you as usual, and we'll do it again next week. We might have something to talk about with the current Mets, because we're talking 2 weeks, pitches and catches. There's going to be some sort of breaking thing this week where the dominoes are going to fall. But then again, I've been saying that for 2 months. So let's hope for the best.
Actually about 1 week, right? The 12th, I think. Didn't they report on the 12th?
Pitchers and catchers.
Today's the 5th, so it's a week from today.
Whoa, pitchers and catchers in 1 week.
Yeah.
Been a long, long winter. What's the weather like where you are right now, Marty Rose?
Well, in Jacksonville this week we have upper 60s, low 70s this week.
That's exactly what we have in Alameda, California.
Good. Nice.
How about you, Robert Cole?
Pretty much the same. I'm in central Florida, and 60s and 70s. We had a lot of rain yesterday.
Yeah, so we did as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you will every day at 3 o'clock, right?
Well, in the summer, yeah. In the summer, you could
10 minutes.
pretty much set your watch on it, yeah. No doubt.
All right, guys, we'll be back next week. If you're listening to this and enjoy our presentations anywhere in the network, please box up some lightly used children's books and take them to the Head Start program in your community. The kids need to read. They need to get their noses out of the games and the computer. They need to develop passion, and they need to become school ready. So that would be a wonderful thing to do. Hope you come back next week, and we'll be here. New York City Baseball, past, present, and future, comfortably zoned radio network. Thank you, gentlemen.
Good night, Ralph.
Good night, Ralph.
Good night.